This is episode 631 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Wally, big news this week on the economic development front from our dear leader, Michelle Lujan Grisham, who is doubling down on Singapore-based solar companies. Of course, a year ago, we saw the announcement, and it was just about a year ago relative to the announcement of this latest company that we were going to have a Maxion solar panel manufacturing facility in Mesa del Sol, south of Albuquerque. They were going to get just a mind-blowing $2.4 billion subsidies from the state of New Mexico and other governments. A lot of that being in the form of industrial revenue bonds, but nonetheless, $2.4 billion is the number. But even with that massive subsidy on the horizon, Maxion has been delayed in their breaking ground. In fact, we're nowhere near breaking ground on that. Possibly, just maybe, it's because between the time of the announcement by the governor a year ago and where we are right now, Maxion's stock plummeted from $22 a share to 16 cents a share. That's a 99% plus reduction in the stock price. Of course, the company had been up above $50 a share back in 2021. The new company is called eBon. It's like a drug commercial. You get these names out here, and you just wonder what the heck does that mean. It's called eBon, EBON. That's the ticker, and they've already been committed $11 million in state and local subsidies. I expect more will come, especially when the industrial revenue bonds are announced, but so far we don't have that information. Their company as well has seen a plummeting share price from $388 a share in 2021 down to their current price of about $5.50 per share. That's only a 98.5% decline. So
and they're not a penny stock, so they could be listed on many exchanges and not have to be an over-the-counter stock if they were trying to raise money. So.
Exactly. And last thing is Maxion's earnings. There's air quotes flying around here. Maxion is getting a negative $8.03 per share, the form of earnings. eBon is only losing you $5.86 per share. So what could go wrong, Wally? This is such a great investment by the state of New Mexico and our governor.
Yes, Paul, it's one of those investing is a tough business.
It's not that tough.
Well, but here's the thing. So, there's investing for money, and then there's investing for other purposes. And they definitely, and let me just say, some companies will invest in another company. They call it a strategic investment, meaning they somehow can bring more value to that company, bring in a new product, a new market, whatever. When, a state does something like this, the extra value is it's going to bring jobs. But here's the thing is the underlying business has to survive, has to build the plant, has to hire the people. And, some of these companies, if you're looking to relocate to New Mexico, and I don't mean this in any disrespect, there could be companies that should absolutely come here and that we should not necessarily throw boatloads or basketfuls of money at, but be saying, yeah, come here. This will be great for you. But once you start really putting all these dollars into that, when it's a highly risky venture, guess what? You might end up with, a spaceport with no space tourism business, a rail runner that almost nobody rides but costs millions of dollars. And unlike in the private sector, when things like that happen, they tend to get turned off. In government, once you start to dump money in, it's tough for them to say no. But in this case, once the stock of these companies goes to zero, if they go out of business, we will be out all of that money. So, but guess what, Paul? It's for the children and it's for solar. So, any amount of risk is worth taking. And
Right.
if it doesn't work out, we tried our best. It was still the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say that the real reason for this has nothing to do with job creation. It doesn't have anything to do with making money for the state or long-term investments in, kind of making New Mexico some kind of real hub for a specific technology. This is 100% about making the governor and making, by her accounts, New Mexico look like some kind of leader in green technology and green manufacturing, because these solar companies are very shaky at best in terms of why would you go with these money-losing companies to bring them here when there's so many other profitable companies that are even involved in some form of green technology. But
yeah, and Paul, that let me just continue along that thought is that the warm glow of being in with the cool kids, as a state. Oh boy, look at New Mexico; they're really supporting that solar. That press release, that's good. You get some coverage, everybody's happy. But as these things go on and on and on, and I won't repeat my couple of examples of things like this that New Mexico's done, it can go on for years and years and years and be a real negative, both politically, economically, taxation wise, making people think that your state is maybe not up to the challenge. And if they're going to be making decisions like that, maybe you shouldn't be part of that state for your business to move here. So, yeah, enjoy it while it still seems like it might happen. And if it does, I will just say, great. Let me just say, I will say, wow, that is fantastic. But both of these investments, in just a matter of a few short days, weeks, months, not even years, have turned from something that looks glowing to something that looks like it might not even happen.
yeah, and I'll leave folks with this. The proper name for the company is eBang International Holdings Inc. EBANG. Again,
But in America, that
eBang.
I would not type that into Google. Let's put it that way in English, the English version of Google. Don't do it.
Yes, but their ticker on the NASDAQ is EBON. So
Okay.
I'll just leave it right there, lest we run across the folks at YouTube and get in trouble. We don't want to do that.
This is a family-friendly show.
Exactly. Now, switching gears, but staying in the broad context of public officials, policy makers, our governor, doing things that she thinks will make her look good while doing very little for the citizenry of the state of New Mexico. The governor has made some headlines here in New Mexico and across the country, especially across the border in Texas, with her advertisements in Texas papers, touting New Mexico as a state that is pro-choice and a destination for medical professionals who share those views to come from Texas, which of course is much more restrictive on abortion, to the state of New Mexico. Now, I know neither of us are doctors, nor do we play them on TV, Wally, but how many doctors do you think are sitting around their kitchen table with the newspaper and they see a full page ad, and one says, the doctor says to his wife, or the female doctor says to her husband, honey, look, New Mexico is radically pro-choice. I think we need to pick up our practice, our family, and move to New Mexico, where we can go do the whatever doctoring or medical procedures we want and not be hindered by the abortion policies. You think this is a thing that's happening, or is this a pipe dream that our governor's got?
Well, there may be some healthcare professionals that is their field that they would like to continue. I won't say there isn't, but
Abortion doctors,
yeah,
specifically.
exactly.
Yeah.
But everyone else, I don't think they would care. And and uh, I have a feeling that you have a list of items on this, but it's one of those things that New Mexico needs doctors, but I'm not sure. It's interesting. We want more abortion doctors so we can have people coming from other states to get abortions. And in our state, that's
The royal we.
yeah, the royal we as a state. The governor we.
The governor we.
Yeah, and yet we're struggling with healthcare. We're with access to healthcare. Our doctors in many specialties in rural New Mexico, it's pretty bad, period, and it's getting increasingly so in urban areas, particularly Albuquerque. And actually, does that help or hurt? This thing, or is it just irrelevant? And so I guess there are things that could be done in healthcare, but Paul, is this the one that the state's going to hang our hat on? And yet again, the theme that's coming up more and more is that this short-term political positioning of not even the state, but of the state's chief executive. The governor seems to be behind a lot of these things. So.
Yeah, a few points. First and foremost, you can go find this campaign on the interwebs at free2providenm.org. They have a lot of information there. So if you are a listener from Texas and a medical provider and you say, gosh, I really want to live in a state that's got no limits on abortion, well, New Mexico may be your chance to succeed. And we'll eventually do a records request at the Rio Grande Foundation to find out how many doctors or medical professionals actually make the move, or whether anybody identifies as saying, we came to New Mexico because of this policy. I would imagine that if you are in the abortion industry, that you have already made said move, whether to New Mexico or some other blue state that allows very liberal rules relating to abortion. So I would exclude them. That's kind of a obvious choice. I don't know how many doctors that don't provide abortions this is going to be attractive to. We did have a legislative session which was dominated by the medical provider shortage back in 2023. The governor did finally force through, despite the trial attorney's iron lock grip on her own party, a change to the medical malpractice laws to at least make New Mexico stop hemorrhaging doctors due to the law that was going to be, it was impending. It was a law that was going to be implemented. And so they went in and changed that law. Of course, gross receipts tax is no longer taken out of deductibles and copays. So those things improved, and more money was poured into Medicaid, thanks to the oil and gas industry, which is providing ample resources for that kind of behavior. Of course, doctors tend to be high earners. Most medical providers and professionals tend to be doing fairly well. So New Mexico's relatively high 5.9% personal income tax isn't necessarily attractive relative to the state of Texas, nor is the propensity of New Mexico to have a huge percentage of its population on Medicaid. Even if we pour more money into it, there are a lot of issues with the Medicaid program and why doctors do not like having so many people on welfare when they're treating them. So that's going to be a problem. And then we have the fact that New Mexico is known for having high crime and crime issues. Medical providers are not necessarily super excited about moving to higher crime areas. And of course, our education system, we know it takes a long time to train to be a doctor. These are some of the most educated people in our society, both in terms of just their knowledge relative to the average person, but also the time they spend in a classroom setting. So they're going to value education for themselves and for their children. And I don't need to tell anybody listening to this program that New Mexico's education system does not get the job done. So if we can overcome those and more challenges here in New Mexico, on the other hand, we have better weather, lower humidity, that kind of thing. So I think the governor should do a beta test here. Advertisements. Hey, we have mountains and low humidity in New Mexico, and then we could do the abortion thing and actually see which one is more effective. I have a feeling that more doctors are probably aware of New Mexico's liberal abortion laws than they are of the relative diversity of our geography and the outdoor opportunities that we have in New Mexico. But that's just a thought.
Yeah, so this is just chuck this one up to I don't even know what woke means anymore, but let's just call it political positioning
Exactly.
for our governor, and you know she's probably going to do a few more of these because you certainly, if you're going to want to go to Washington, if you're banking on a job in the Harris administration, thinking that she's going to win, you're not going to necessarily get that job from the stellar record of how New Mexico has been operated over the last several years. And by the way, not the only state that can be said. You know, you could say that about California as well. So there's a lot of governors out there that are going to have to emphasize their party purity as opposed to their governing success when it comes to their states, if they're going to want to go to Washington and spread the joy to all of us. So
You got it. Well, we've talked about liquefied natural gas exports and the Biden administration's attempts to limit those. An article that I saw kind of highlighted the absurdity of that policy. The headline from the AP: French imports of Russia's liquefied natural gas surge. Ukraine supporters seek a stop. Short story is that France has increased Russian liquefied natural gas imports to 4.4 billion cubic meters in the first half of 2024 when compared to just over 2 billion the same period a year ago. So this is one of those circumstances where the United States, rather than increasing and going full throttle to make our allies, dependent on American LNG, they are going to Russia, which we've spent, a few $1 billion supporting the war effort there on the Ukrainian government's behalf. So essentially, by limiting American LNG exports, Joe Biden's policy, Kamala Harris, of course, part of that administration, so it's worth noting. But of course, this isn't necessarily A1 at the top of the agenda list, but it's something that should be questioned when Kamala Harris is running for office. Is she going to continue to limit LNG exports, which in turn help Russia sell their export liquefied natural gas to Western countries and therefore fund the war effort? Seems like a bit of a problem, but I guess when the Harris campaign has not put forth any public policies whatsoever, I think it's safe to say that at this point, we know Kamala Harris is pro-choice on abortion, and she now opposes taxing tips. So those are the only two policies I can actually officially tell you, because she said in the past that she opposed fracking, which would destroy New Mexico's economy. But she says she's backed away from that, and I think she's backed away from a number of policies. So it's really just a couple of them. And LNG exports, for people who have even a rudimentary understanding of public policy, You would think this would be a slam dunk, but instead we're limiting American exports thanks to the Biden administration and the radical environmentalists that support him.
Yeah, and Paul, France is a huge producer consumer of electricity from the nuclear
Yep.
process, and even at that, oil and nuclear, they're two primary energy sources. Oil, of course, used for diesel and gasoline, and then electricity coming largely from their nuclear. And yet they still need natural gas to the point where they will import it from Russia. And so I think these policies, all I can say is it seems like they always come back to this idea that is just not true, is that oil and gas are on the way out very quickly, that they're just their usage and their desirability will just plummet very, very quickly. And it's just not the case. And when you see a country like France still needs to import from such an unsavory character as the Russians, you know that it is not something that's going to be going away anytime quickly. So we'll see what happens. So, but if you assume that in the United States, even if it's not true, you're like, oh, let's not export. Nobody's going to be using natural gas. And I say that if they're not going to be using natural gas, or oil, what's going to happen? And we've kind of seen this and developed it in lesser developed and developing countries. Is that means we're going to use a lot of coal. And so, if you're going to slow down exports of natural gas, there's nothing else other than coal that many of these countries can use for their primary energy needs.
Yeah, France does a lot right when it comes to uh, electricity generation and nuclear. We could definitely learn about learn from France, where 92% of electricity in 2019 came from nuclear and so-called renewables. And you can, when you have a great source like nuclear that's always on, you can actually do some more with the renewables because they go up and down, and unless there's an issue with one of the nuclear plants, you're okay. But LNG and natural gas in general have many uses beyond electricity generation, and so France still requires that, and other countries like Germany are even more reliant on LNG. So it's not just France. This is a challenge that's being replicated in Western European country after Western European country, not just France. And then, of course, we're talking also about Asian countries as well, when we could be replacing, or they could be replacing, coal with natural gas. So many, many opportunities there. Wally, the state of New Mexico has a brand spanking new government office funded with $2 million of our tax dollars to address housing issues in our state. It is called the New Mexico Housing Department, and I think their goals are fine. In fact, they say that they are going to work with local governments to help reduce regulation, in turn making it easier, faster, and cheaper to develop housing in the state. Yay. Okay.
All right.
I'm all for it.
Good.
So their first regulation should be the governor's EV charging station mandates that were passed just earlier this year. I don't think that'll happen, though.
No. And so, yeah, there are a lot of things, and there are more and more regulations coming out trying to, again, sway things in a weird position. You hear a lot about heat pumps, which, heat pumps are efficient electric heaters, but guess what? They don't work very well in older housing, and they're expensive and a lot of things. So, we're going to require there. While on the one hand we say we want housing to be affordable, on the other hand we're doing many, many things: electric vehicle charging, heat pump requirements. Albuquerque, Bernalillo County area is still a very slow area with regard to getting permits, and it's just unlike a lot of places that are a little bit more builder friendly. So yeah, it'll be interesting to what this group comes up with. I have a feeling that this. I'm looking forward for the Blue Ribbon Commission report, Paul, that talks about what should be done. Frankly, basically what's been happening at the Legislative Finance Committee, I would have just told them to do a report. They've been doing a really good job. Just save the money. They could probably do it for a fraction of the cost and get you to the same place. But this special group has a task, and it'll be interesting to see what they come up with.
Now, I know we never talk about the gross receipts tax on this show, but gross receipts tax reform would be a logical step to addressing our housing issues with the cost of housing, because the gross receipts tax is applied at many stages of the construction process. So that's a second thing that needs no government, no statewide entity. And then the third thing would be let's address the zoning rules, permitting, and other regulations. And it sounds like there may be some level of interest in doing that in this new department, new office within the governor's kind of milieu of various agencies and departments. So we shall see if anything positive comes out of this. But definitely there is room for improvements, and it's just as an advocate for making New Mexico government effective, it would be nice if they just targeted the issues that government is creating before spending money on a new department to somehow circumvent or allow them to not actually address the problems that do need to be addressed in the state.
Yeah, that is a good point. And then the other point is that when you do things like this, kind of separate and apart from the underlying issues of government in the state of New Mexico, it's like, well, we can do this, this, and this, but those tend to be secondary or tertiary factors relative to having a good workforce, not, having reasonable taxation, having reasonable crime. Because guess what? If you build things, Paul, people steal a lot of your stuff. So there are a lot of issues. And then at the end of the day, the thing that I know this is counterintuitive for a state like New Mexico, but at the end of the day, it's all about helping the businesses really be, reducing their cost. How do we help businesses reduce their cost of things? And somehow we're fine doing that directly, like with the film subsidy. But when it comes to actually having government efficiency that would end up helping businesses be more efficient, guess what? When they're more efficient, Paul, they make more money, but also their costs are lower, their prices are lower. And it seems like we always poo-poo that one. We don't need to worry about that. That's not real. We don't want to do corporate welfare. We don't need affordable housing and houses that badly.
You bring up a very good point about crime, and I know I've talked about this a little bit as well, but there's a news story that I briefly wanted to address. The mayor of Albuquerque has, I think the city's bought this facility, the old high-rise that is at the corner of San Mateo and Central. It was a
First
bank
National Bank in the olden days.
It was a Bank of the West, and now is just largely sitting empty. Now, for those familiar with Albuquerque, you will know that Central and San Mateo is the heart of the International District, aka the war zone.
And now the new term I'm hearing is zombie land, because there's so many people are running out into the streets, either very high on substances or having mental illness. So I actually have heard that term a lot applied in that area.
Well, long story short, the mayor is touting on social media the construction of over 300 new or construction, the creation of 300 new units for what he calls Albuquerque families. Basically, uh, we'll see how this works in practice, but this is a government-owned facility meant to house people on the margins who may or may not be homeless. And my point in bringing this up, and I just kind of made this connection this morning right here, is there are places around Albuquerque and other cities where people would be inclined to move and to fully utilize the housing stock available were it not for the crime issues. And this building has obviously 300 new units. That is a lot of new units. Uh, I, Obviously, the preference would be that you make it a safe, attractive area. And, that's a centrally located place. You could easily, if it were not for the crime issues, which is like if the sun doesn't rise and the sun doesn't set, but the international district, aka the war zone, has been what it has been, maybe slightly better in the past, but it's been this way for a very, very long time. And so addressing those crime issues would also expand the housing stock to more families, more people who would fully utilize it, as opposed to having the government take it over and manage it that way. So
Yeah, and Paul, government owned high rise housing, boy, that's sure starting to in a high crime area. That's starting to sound like the projects from the 60s and 70s, and places like Chicago was the place I saw the projects firsthand as a young kid, and my eyes were kind of open to not everything is was better in the projects. That's for sure.
yeah, I believe Cabrini Green is the one that comes to mind as a just absolute hellscape when it comes to those kinds of projects. And uh, again, uh, you're not solving anything by having a physical building available, no matter how many units you're talking about, if you don't address the crime issues. And it's going to happen uh, both internally and externally in order to make this anything resembling a solution. So that's a real challenge that the city's going to face and this mayor's going to face, because if that situation becomes unsafe, that's going to make it unattractive to people, no matter how desperate they are for housing. Wally, moving on to the Rio Grande Foundation has published a new study on the clean fuel standard. This was adopted in the 2024 legislative session. Uh, we contracted with a consultancy that did some modeling relating to the cost of New Mexico's clean fuel standard. The Environment Department at the time claimed, oh, this isn't going to have any costs, which we knew was absurd and inaccurate at the time, because if the big oil and gas companies could come up with a product that cut CO2 by 20 or even 30%, that it costs no money, that they would do that immediately and pat themselves on the back and advertise and take a lot of market share. I think a lot of people would like to, if it was free, have less CO2 emissions coming out of their tailpipe. But the reality is that there's no such thing as a free lunch. And as we note in this report, using data from the state of Oregon and their Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, these regulations, HB 41 was the bill. It's not implemented completely yet, not until spring of 2025. But once it is, and by 2030, the regulations will increase gasoline prices by 30 cents a gallon, 34.7 cents a gallon for diesel, and by 2040, prices will rise by 45 cents a gallon for gasoline and 52 cents for diesel. So these policies are going to have some real world impacts. The Environment Department, I think, was safe to say, attempting to downplay those because they are ultimately under the control of the Lujan Grisham administration and not inclined to highlight the problems with her public policies.
Yeah, and Paul, I applaud your getting this study done. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens because New Mexico is not a big state, and we're not a huge consumer of gasoline and diesel relative to the states, both to our east, west, and north. And if that's the case, it's amazing how things can sometimes go south in a hurry. And you only have to look to California, where the more formulations you have, the higher the price is going to be. And the entire state of New Mexico has a population that basically could be just one county in Southern California. So it'll be interesting to see how this rolls out. And I think my point is in no way to discount your study, as it will be uneven. I almost guarantee that in certain places right now that it's pretty easy for them to get formulations that are also useful in Arizona, Colorado, and Texas. If they have to be New Mexico only, it can increase distribution routes, and we'll have to see how this plays out. But is the price going to be lower? We know it's not, and in some places it may be a heck of a lot higher.
Yeah, the best we will do. Well, we're going to definitely do one thing, which is we're going to be creating a little chart with the AAA gas price index. It's going to be a statewide average, and we'll be watching what happens with that chart as New Mexico moves to implement this policy. Of course, we will also try to do some actual experimentation by seeing, cross the border in Texas, how things go versus New Mexico, kind of more anecdotally speaking. But great news for us is AAA already tracks this information, gas price differences among the U.S. states, and I think we'll see a impact readily apparent once this law does take effect. But folks should be aware that this has not taken effect. Most laws take effect more quickly. This one, they've had a series of statewide meetings, and it won't take effect until spring of 2025. Just a few minutes left. California is re-banning plastic bags. How do you say? Well, in 2014, they banned plastic bags the first time. Those were the thin ones that we still have in many parts of New Mexico. That ban resulted in more plastic bags being thrown away, nearly 50% more to be exact, according to the Los Angeles Times. So California, in its infinite wisdom as a state led by lunatics, they said, well, we're not going to stand pat and watch this policy fail. We're going to repeal it. Ha, just kidding. Not going to happen in Gavin Newsom's California. No, we are going to double down and ban the thicker plastic bags that are supposed to be reusable that were encouraged by the previous ban. So California is now in the process of banning those bags. We'll see what is done to replace those. Maybe, maybe they'll just have the innovative solution. Hear me out on this, Wally. Since both Harris and Trump are wanting to ban taxes on tips, maybe
Yes.
we will suddenly have an influx of young people standing around at the shopping center exits working for tips and no taxes. Although, to be fair, if they'd already done that, they would have not reported them. Let's just put it that way. But anyway, we'll see what the solutions they come up with are for getting your groceries from the store to your vehicle, absent any bags in the state of California.
Yeah, it is very interesting. So, and is it the number or the amount of material? Was it that we're using thicker bags and throwing them away? Or, but in any event, they're just trying to control something that, at the end of the day, is probably going to be a net benefit of zero and probably cost a whole lot, because what comes next, you can get those kind of cloth bags that people see, and I see some pretty nasty, rotten ones of those. You certainly don't want to carry your leaking package of hamburger in those and end up using that again. But maybe we can wash them and utilize detergents and more water and more energy to dry them as opposed to use these plastic bags. But I don't know, Paul. This is the majoring in minors. You look at these really inconvenience things that are targeted where they don't even look at the issues that make more sense with regard to things, food waste, whatever. So it's like, yes, let's just do this. So let's see what the next one. Maybe we're going to go to metal bags. So and I'm not talking aluminum. Aluminum. I'm talking maybe chromoly steel, very thin ones, reusable, and that's the way to go. But we'll see. Is there an innovation there? Guess what? Costco and Sam's, you don't get a bag. You either bring your own or use the box or do whatever. But again, that's a business decision that they've made, and it's amazing that when they try to force these things down, how the unintended consequences just rear their ugly head.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
And it's not friendly to old people who have a hard time carrying groceries with their arms outraised. So I don't know. Maybe that's the angle. So
well, to take a joke from a different policy failure, mostly the federal government, there's a great meme out there. I used to not be able to carry $100 worth of groceries to my car, but now I can. Of
yeah,
course, that's an inflation joke, but yeah, you're still going to need the same amount of stuff. It's just going to cost you more, and we'll see what happens with this particular issue in California. I'm sure some places in New Mexico will follow suit, but you just wait and see.
Santa Fe,
Yes.
Albuquerque, Las Cruces.
Uh, we have a candidate switcheroo underway in New Mexico in a legislative seat, and this one's mostly newsworthy because House District 53 is one of the most evenly divided districts in our state, and the House is where it's at in terms of whether our legislature is going to continue to move further and further left, as it did during the primary. And one of those races that were decided in the primary was the defeat of Willie Madrid, a moderate Democrat, by Dr. John Hill. He's a much more progressive Democrat, and he unfortunately has to drop out of the race because of cancer medical issues relating to that. The noteworthy aspect is that Sarah Silva, who was one of the founders of Cafe, New Mexico Communities of Faith. They are faith-based in name only, but Sarah Silva has been endorsed by John Hill to take the seat. Willie Madrid, being the moderate, is probably not going to get the nod from the Doña Ana County Commission, but this is one of those 50-50 districts that is going to really have a lot to say about where New Mexico's legislature winds up. And so with a switch being made at this late date, going to be a very impactful decision there. We'll see when that replacement has been made, but my money is on Sarah Silva. And then finally, Wally, your old employer at one time, PNM, emphasizing their Texas ties on their new stock symbol, ticker symbol, TXNM. That's how you can find PNM on the stock exchange. Now, I know you're no longer an insider over there. You no longer have the finger on the pulse of the latest and greatest at Public Service Company of New Mexico, but this strikes me as an attempt by PNM to emphasize its Texas ties, its Texas growth, and where more and more of their money is coming from as a company, and maybe preparing themselves for a purchase. Oh, they're in Texas. Oh, I'm gonna look at buying PNM. Don't worry about that slow growing renewable intensive mandates heavy state of New Mexico.
Yeah, wild and crazy, and Texas has its wild and crazy
It
from the
does.
utility side too.
Indeed.
But they tend to be a little bit better place, and when it comes to the growth aspect, absolutely. So I have said many times is that in many respects, functionally, the headquarters of PNM is not New Mexico; it's in Texas because so many of their administrative functions are outside of Fort Worth, not at Alvarado Square in downtown Albuquerque like they used to be. And this is just a move more in that direction. Do I think you're right? This is one of those. They're looking at making another run at a merger, and having Texas before New Mexico. Evidently, they thought that was in their best interest to send the signal to Wall Street that take a look at us when this deal, when the deal's put forward, it's a good deal, and we'll see what happens. But now we have, both of our major investor-owned utilities, New Mexico Gas Company and PNM, both in various stages of desiring to be owned by others, and we will see what happens with that. But again, PNM, I have a feeling that this is stage one. Maybe the name even changes at some point in the future. So,
absolutely. All right. Well, we are going to leave it there. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.